totally live. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments in the chat. Let me know. But hello, I am Angela from Angela and Then Some. I'm just a lady on the internet who likes to talk about the big things and the little things. And yeah, and tonight's big thing we're talking about, we're going to ask a semi-cozy, kind of scary question. Are we alone in the dark? Or are we surrounded by energy that we just don't understand? We can kind of think of it as our consciousness is like a radio, or we ourselves are like a radio, and maybe ghosts and energy of the like are just stations that we don't usually tune into. So that is a fun little thought experiment there to hold on to. So for those in the chat, let me know. Are you team? If you don't know what I'm doing right now, I'm actually like I'm doing a little copy pasty. I forgot to do that earlier. Are you team skeptic, team sensitive? Maybe you do tune in a little bit and lean on that side of like, I think there's something. Or are you team both, where you think science and spirituality or ghost and energy, same but different, or where some things can be explained, some things maybe not so easily, but they all are around there. So let me know. Me personally, I am both. I think team both, as in there are definitely ways to explain certain phenomenons and things that someone said they heard or thought they heard, but then there are definitely things where it's like, wow, that was a weird one. I don't know, bro. So yeah. And today I have a very special thing I did. If it comes out weird or doesn't look right on the screen, it happens because I'm doing my best. So for tonight's map, our road map, we are going to be discussing. Yep, it did a weird thing. Okay, the science of spooky, why places feel haunted, where we'll discuss like infrasound, EMF, pareidolia, sleep paralysis, the spirit lens, where we'll discuss ancestral spirits, residual versus intelligent hauntings, as well as like energetic imprints. If you're familiar, don't worry. If you're not familiar with any of these topics, we're gonna give you the quick little synopsis rundown so you can kind of join the discussion and be cool with it. Stories that stick, meaning I'll tell some of mine, you tell me some of yours, and we'll really like discuss what we have had on personal experiences or maybe even stories that we've heard. Meaning making, what it says about grief, attention, and love, because a lot of ghost stories and things in the spiritual realm and spiritual nature tend to have a definite interpretation that we could have on our own psyche and what we as human beings are going through, or something that may have occurred somewhere. And then lastly, integration. Talking a little bit about spiritual safety, general safety, I suppose, boundaries, and living well with mystery. So, sound good? Give me a thumbs up in the chat if you're like, yes, sounds good, and you enjoyed the thing that showed up on the screen. Because if you enjoyed the thing that showed up on the screen, hopefully we'll be doing more as time goes on, as I get better at doing things. Maybe learning some hotkeys and how to really do the things. That'll be fun. Okay, so speaking first, we are, Dennis said, I want proof, gotta remain skeptical until then. Respect, okay. But yeah, sometimes you need that proof to be like, oh, there was a thing happening here. So, okay. So the science of spooky. Woo! So one of the things in my research, science wise, about ghosts, spirits, and energy was infrasound. And this side tangent, it kind of reminded me of like, have you guys, any of you ever heard of like the CIA having like a death ray, but it's like a musical note, or like the fart note, or where they can make you just like crap your pants? That's what this reminded me of when I went down that rabbit hole. If you never heard of that, that's a thing, and apparently that is a thing. Infrasound refer to as like low frequencies. They can be from fans, air conditioning systems, and just general hums of things that could just reach that frequency where we can't hear it, like notably hear it. But they are internally, they can cause like, depending on the intensity of the frequency, can cause your neurons to kind of move around. I think that, don't quote me on that one, but definitely for your lungs to feel the vibrations, your guts to feel the vibrations, like your stomach, and things like that. So that could definitely be why, the bathroom gun, the crap your pants frequency is the thing. But yeah, so that's one of those things that also makes people feel like as if there's a presence in the room, or an unease when you enter somewhere, because there could be that low level infrasound, which it could be natural or nature as well. Like certain rustles or hums or whooshes through certain trees could create a low enough frequency to make that. So that's be why, when some people, science wise, it explains why when some people enter certain places or areas, you get that sense of dread, or like something's there, because you're feeling something that you're not consciously fully aware that you're feeling. So very interesting. And this also goes into like personal experiences. Like if you've ever felt weird going into like a basement, a warehouse, maybe even a hospital, things like that. That frequency could be, like I said, from an air conditioning system, from fans, things that are just low humming and doing their thing, that could be making you feel unsettled because it's affecting some part of your system. Pretty cool. But they also can make not only the physical, that sensation of like feeling unease and presence, they can also, with long term, not long term use, but long term engagement being around there, or even the one that a frequency you just come in contact with that you didn't realize was doing something to you, can make things like, chills and like shadowy presence on the peripheral of your vision, like illusions of that too. So if you ever feel like an area of your house is creepy or freaky, check to see if there's some weird hums that you may not be aware of. And then we go into another weird one, EMF. You may be familiar with this if you've ever watched like ghost hunting or things like that, where they have like a little machine that goes like shh, and then sometimes they pick up words. EMF machine. One of the reasons people say that your brain just seeks patterns in the noise. So some of it, even if it sounds clear, you may just think that's what it's saying. And even I think there's even speculation that the EMF machine itself creates the noise kind of thing, because I don't think I yeah, some people say that the EMF machine itself creates the noise, and also like EMF fields in general um, can be caused by a lot of electronics and things, from Wi-Fi to your phone. So better just don't sleep with your phone next to your head. Or even like there was one story in my research of a woman whose alarm clock was emitting an EMF field around her or something. So she would get like sleep paralysis, like the night terrors type thing, unease, chills, all that. And this was like an ongoing thing. And then she found out it was her alarm clock. So that's like horrifying in its own way of like your alarm clock, like really. But that was more like the special case of that EMF, just interacting with her system in particular. So there is some science to why like certain people, I think if you've ever heard of this, let me know in the chat, where people want to move to places where there is no Wi-Fi, no internet access, no cell phones and things like that, because they say they are sensitive to like get headaches, they feel nauseous and things like that. So there is evidence to support that, where some people are ultra sensitive and maybe they should not be around these things. But then it also goes into like maybe we all should not be around these things, but that's a whole other discussion. So yeah, I guess that could go into how some of us, I assume, if you are familiar with like power strips near your bed or electrical devices, there is, I think even TVs, you can kind of hear that low whirring sound sometimes, or that hum, depending on the TV and depending on like what it's doing. I personally have experienced that, where like a power strip or something, or a cord, or like some little device that's just making a low whirring noise. All right, Danielle, there was a character on Better Call Saul that had that. I've never watched it. I do know about it. So cool. But yes. Um, So that is like the thing too that could be causing like unease and things that people don't realize. There are scientific explanations first. And then this was my favorite one when I learned about this. I was like, oh gosh, that's what it's called. I'm gonna try to pronounce it. I'm just laid on the internet. So pronunciation is a problem. Danielle also said, I think some peeps are more sensitive than others. Yeah. Everyone's a little bit different. There could be a general average of most people are fine, but we need to be aware of the spectrum of life and when people are not fine. It's called pareidolia. Pareidolia, yes. Since your brain, just like your brain tries to seek pattern in noise, your brain also tries to seek pattern in things. So if you've ever like stared at a tile piece or stared at the grain of a wood finish, and then you're like, "Ooh, look, there's a face there." That's your brain trying to see what's not there. Sometimes, or you've seen like Jesus in a piece of toast. Those type of things. That's pareidolia. I think it's one of those things which is like also can't remember the whole thing, but when you see things on the side of your vision, sometimes you're like, what was that? It's actually scientifically how your eyes work. They're better at getting color in the focal point of your eyes and then seeing movement on the side. And also, it kind of gets gray on the side. You're not as good at seeing color off to the side. So that creates that movement of anything could be like, and you're like, it was a ghost. But yeah. I explained this to one of my siblings the other day, and I think I explained it better, so I apologize. But if you're familiar with it, let me know in the chat. Correct me if I'm wrong. So yeah, just for funsies, what's the most ridiculous face you've ever seen in everyday stuff? Maybe paint on a wall you noticed looked a certain way, or like I said, tile or wood grain. That's one of them. I know for me, growing up in my bedroom, for a long time I had my bed against the wall a certain way. Eventually that changed, but for a long time, and then it got repainted over, so that it's not there anymore. But there was right where my head would lay, there was a little like paint area. It was white paint, but it looked like it was a little dude fishing. Like he had a hat on, he had his fishing pole, he had a little like off on a cliff, little boat cliff going on, and then into the water. I think I remember showing somebody that one time, one of my siblings or my mom, and I said what it looks like, and they were like, "Oh," and then they were like, "Oh my gosh, it does look like that." Yeah, I would just watch a little dude fishing while I went to bed. Fun little story there. So if you have any fun little stories like that where you remember seeing a face or figure in a less scary way, feel free to share that in the chat anytime. And then we're gonna go on to in the science of spooky sleep paralysis. I personally have dealt with this. I haven't dealt with it in the scariest of ways. But yeah, I'm just gonna air my laundry out there. I had a job once uh, where I would ride my bike to work, work out in the morning, ride my bike to work. So pretty tiring. So sometimes I would lay my head on the desk and just let myself rest. But obviously, when you let yourself rest, sometimes you fall asleep. And so I was still so actively trying to stay conscious and aware because I was at work, even though my body was like, no, we're going down. It's too quiet. The hums are just putting you to sleep. It's cold in here. It's hibernation time. So I was fighting so hard to stay awake that my literal body, I would wake up, but still be in like semi sleep mode where I could not move fully. But I remember being so conscious and aware, like, come on, we gotta get our stuff together. We gotta look normal. But my body was like, no, we're still paused. So yeah, and sleep paralysis. The scientific explanation for that is that essentially, I think we've talked about dreams and subconscious and things like that before. That you're during dream state or REM sleep, your body wants to keep you safe. So it shuts down like the bodily functions of everything, not shuts down, but keeps them at a low power state pretty much. Tori said I've had that. Yep, I've had that happen. Yep, yep. Um, and when your body's trying to just stay at a low power state, and then you wake up but not fully, where your body is still thinking we're supposed to be sleeping, and then you get this weird there's a word for it, but I can't remember, but semi-waking state. So that's when you may feel like there's a presence in the room, there's a weight on your chest, or like you can't move, which could be scary on its own for a lot of people. That's when we talk about sleep paralysis, which it's a normal thing that happens. One of the recommendations is to sleep on your side, not your back. That's the only one I can recall. But definitely after this live, I will put in the comment section any of the videos I found particularly helpful or interesting. So feel free to look through those and watch them yourself to be like, ooh. So science explains some of these shadows, ghosts, spirits, but not the whole thing. Not the whole thing. So what do you think, Kat? Ever walked into a room and you knew, like, you felt something was just off? Like maybe you felt there was a presence? I think I asked this question earlier, but not a lot of you were there yet. So I'm just asking again. I've definitely had that numerous times, walking into creepy places. One of the houses I used to live in had a basement. That was fun. Where I live, normally basements aren't really a thing, but yep, it had a basement. It was cold. It was damp in there. You could see the foundation and kind of look out of the house. Like it was not the fullest of basements, but it was a basement. And yeah, that definitely had a vibe to it. Probably just because it was underneath the house and it was an old house. Yeah, that was my story there. So moving on to the spirit lens, where we were going to discuss ancestral things, residual energetic intelligence, and things like that. Um, One of the ways the spiritual looks at it is there's residual and there's intelligence. Um, Residual energy or spirit is an energetic replay, which also goes into the science where there's a word for it, but I can't recall. Where residual haunting discusses that it's more so just a replay of an event. So when people talk about haunted houses or places where they're just like, oh yeah, if you go here at midnight, you'll see the woman cross the bridge, or if you go here at 3 p.m., that floorboard creaks and there's no explanation for it. That's considered like a residual haunting. That there's no interaction, or like when what they said, like we've always seen this in movies and stuff where a spirit or ghost goes into like a wall and just disappears, but like on a track where they're just doing a walk and then they go into a wall. But then if you look back in the past, there's like, oh, there used to be a door there, another house was there. So it's like they are going where they should go. Um, but that is like the residual haunting where it's more like no interaction. You're just watching it. It's just happening. And then there's the intelligent haunting, which is considered like they're responsive. So I guess if you believe the EMF radio wave thing does something, and then you ask certain questions and it sounds like they are responding back to you, that would be an sign of, in the spiritual lens, of intelligent haunting. And intelligent hauntings can go many a ways. Some of them are, what if you are religious, they can go into like demonic aspect of being like, oh no, that's really scary. Or they can go into like mischievous, like maybe there's like, I think I saw one ghost hunting video where they were in like a hospital or something, like an old abandoned hospital, and they said like if you throw a ball down the like one of the balls that are just randomly there that was left down the hall, it will come back to you. Even if there is nobody down there, it will roll back. And sure enough, it took like 2 hours, I think, but they had set up their camera and it did. So that could be kind of considered an intelligent haunting. Well, I would consider that intelligent haunting because they even like vocally said like the name of the quote unquote ghost, and then they're like, we're gonna leave this ball here. Feel free to move it back to us if you want to play. And so yeah. Ricardo says, I've been in places where I can sense energy, but oftentimes these are very lived in places like family homes or homes someone lived in before they went to hospice. Yes. There's actually a thing called stone tap theory, where I think what Ricardo is touching upon is certain places, and we may get that, we're probably going to get to that soon, but certain places, the walls and literally stones and things like that, like they're known like stones, if buildings are made out of iron or stone and then something else, like I want to say gypsum, those stones or materials tend to hold in energy. And that goes into like the science aspect as well. That energy, depending if like traumatic events happen and things like that, and locations where traumatic events or just heightened emotions happen, certain objects or buildings and things can hold residual energy. And that's what people have found when they do research considering like residual hauntings and things like that. Especially if you ever heard of things like, oh, this brush is cursed or this necklace is cursed or something, that there are like energetic signatures left over from like traumatic events and things like that. So that gets really interesting when you go into that because that goes into physics, which I'm like, physics. But yeah, that was very cool, Ricardo. Thank you for mentioning that. But yeah, and I think that goes back into like even the EMF things, um, even slightly infrasound and things like that, like spiritually, energetically. Some of us are more sensitive than others, so it's kind of like the spectrum of what one person be like. I feel fine in this room, and I could just stay here for an hour in the dark. It's fine. Someone else is like, this is creeping me out, and it may be that they're picking up on some energy that happened in the room. Maybe a lot of people were sick here, or a lot of people were happy here, or a lot of people, died here, or like a horrible event happened, and you're kind of picking up on that energy. Or it could just be that there is like a low hum frequency that occurs in that room from like the old like heating system or cooling system, and you're picking up on that too. So yeah, very interesting getting to the science of it and trying to figure out that there's so many ways this could like it can go. Continuing on in the spirit area of it, I would like to ask you, chat, have you ever felt a presence that maybe felt intelligent and actually noticed you back? I think a friend of mine, states, I went to the Museum of Death in LA. That place felt really heavy and dark. I felt drained afterwards. Yes, I completely forgot. I also went to the Museum of Death in LA. I was expecting Museum of Death to be more encompassing of the full aspect of death. The positives, the negatives, so like say murder or suicides. Those really terrible parts of death would be mentioned. But then also, I was thinking it'd be more like the rituals of what people do when someone dies, like the love that is shown, the grief, the actual understanding of like, oh, like care that goes into like the whole human aspect of death. But it was like the murder museum pretty much. It should not be called the Museum of Death. It should be called the Murder Museum because it was just woo, it did feel really heavy in there and it did feel like negative, sad. You were just like by the time you but me personally, by the time I was at the end of it, I was like, I want to escape. I want to get out of here. Like this. And so I could have just imagined you're someone working there, which you could be like, yeah, I do feel it. It's okay because you're protecting your own energy. You know how to do that. Or you're like, I don't feel anything. I feel fine because you're not in tune with what you might be feeling, or you're just not as sensitive. Um, Ricardo states, you think some people who have negative energy or intentions feel the same energy from the past or even future. So bad people can sense bad spirits easier. That's interesting. I think that could go hand in hand with trauma. Certain people, like just like in your conscious self, if you encountered a lot of negative people or trauma or people who weren't nice people, but you've seen how they play out, like things they say, keywords or body language or things that they do, and you're like, I know what they're about. Like you get it. I think that could go the same into the spiritual sense of energy. So people who are used to certain energy. But that goes into if you go into the consciousness of trauma like that, certain people, if you're not actively working through it, you become familiar with that. And that's the pattern. Like you only trust people who are bad people because that's what you're used to. So that can even go into places, I think, or maybe where you choose to live or what you think is a good house or like I'm comfortable here is actually just the energy you're used to being surrounded by, which actually may not be good for you. Even if you're a bad person or a good person, whatever gray spectrum of it you're on. Yeah. The dentist date, same. Didn't know what to expect going in, but wow, that place was heavy. Yeah, the Museum of Death, that place was heavy. Yeah. So, would not recommend unless you are particularly very interested in the Museum of Death for the, the negatives of death aspect of all the horrible things people have done to each other. If that floats your boat, then yeah. Um, I think going back to my question of if you ever felt a presence notice you back, kind of seemingly intelligent, I personally know, which I'm good with that. But I did have a friend tell me a story where they were out in the mountains going on a little hike. They were also, I think, a little bit on uh, the mushrooms. Not a lot, but they were a little. They were thinking they were gonna have a good time. They weren't having a good time, but they were sitting down like on a rock, watching the stream, and they noticed something at the corner of their eye moving. And when they had their phone out, just scrolling because they were just like not having a good time, and they were thinking maybe they should just head back. They turned around or turned to whatever was coming at them that they noticed, and it ended up being a creature of sorts. I don't remember the full description of what they told me, but it was a little creature, and they were reaching for their phone. That phone, they were like gonna take it or do something with it, but he turned around at that exact same time, and they made eye contact. That's what he said. That they made eye contact, and it looked at him like, "Oh, you could see me," and then just poof, it disappeared on him. So I'm not sure if that's considered ghost, but could be considered spirit, obviously, because spirit of the woods. And I'm just like, man, you're just out there living your life thinking, I'm safe. I'm just gonna go on a hike in mountains while I'm on uh, something that where I'm not in the same state of mind as usual. And I'm just like, wow, you're living that life, right? Like, so yeah, that's my story. Well, not my story, a friend of mine's story. I personally have never had a presence notice me back, which I'm cool. Like I said, cool with that. Anybody in the chat have ever had that experience? Or maybe back to what I said earlier, even noticed that presence somewhere? I'm trying to recall if I have, but I don't think so. What about walking into a room and just feeling like Ricardo touched on this? They took a trip, yes. Victoria, they took a trip for sure. Just running into fairies, yes, yeah. Yes, Danielle, just running into the little people of the woods, yes, and they were apparently trying to take the phone or look at it. But yeah, it was an interesting story. And I think Ricardo touched on this where he said he's been to a place where he has felt energy and things like that. So like, have you ever anybody else ever walked into a room and knew something had happened there? Um, I don't think I have. Uh, I guess maybe hospitals and things like that. I briefly worked at a hospital doing night shift as a I don't want to say cleaner. I don't know what the best description is. I didn't felt creeped out, but I definitely felt like the energy of a hospital. If you kind of sense their energy, you know what we're talking about. Hospital energy. Ricardo states, not personally, but my parents have had experience with spirits before, both good and bad events. Yeah, I think in my family, my grandmother, I personally wasn't told these stories, but I think a sibling of mine had more conversations with my grandmother. She has since passed away. It's been years at this point, but she was more in tune on the spiritual side and talked about seeing demons or ghosts and spirits and things like that, and actually having encounters with them. So that's a whole nother layer of like ancestral knowledge that I guess I did not get and that wasn't passed on unless it's somewhere dormant. It makes me worried that someday I'm just going to start seeing things or something. Then yeah. And continuing on, um, speaking of ancestors and grief as well. Speaking of ancestors and grief because losing loved ones, there are the spirit lens looking through it as some people have dreams when a loved one dies or visits around like births or anniversaries or even meaningful coincidences as like certain birds, maybe hearing certain music, seeing certain numbers frequently. Um, but yeah, I would ask like share a time when maybe you've experienced this chat where certain things maybe when you were feeling down about a loved one who's recently passed, be it a grandmother, be it a parent, be it a sibling, a cousin, aunt, uncle, where something came up while you were having those thoughts. Something came up that made you feel like maybe they has sent you something. I think for certain people like they say like butterflies and things like that. I don't think I think only once that had happened with has happened with me. Um, but they weren't passed away. But it was like in a backyard in a house I used to live with my sisters, and we smelled perfume strongly that kind of reminded of us of our grandmother. I think me and my one of my sisters may have smelled it first, and we confirmed it with each other, and then we called another sister in just to be like, "Can you smell that?" And we did all smell it. So then one of my sisters actually called my grandmother and was just like, "Hey, grandma, just checking with you. How you doing?" Because it all made us concerned. Like, why are we all smelling the same smell? And so things like that. That's my story of it. But yeah, I think that goes into like certain spaces, like Ricardo got into was certain spaces hold stories, such as I guess houses, as Ricardo stated. He's felt like that energy in houses and things like that. Um, Hospitals for sure. Any other places you can think of, chat, that definitely feel that you can feel the heaviness or maybe the lightness of energy when you walk into a place. I think a lot of people graveyards and things like that, but that's because I would imagine that's less because of the literal dead bodies there and more of the energetic sense of, like I said, eh, scientifically, stone, iron, things like that have been known to be able to hold that energy and have like that imprint. So I would think a place like a graveyard would have that, the more the grief of people visiting and crying and all that energy with it. I think just like Ricardo said, if people are my metaphor from earlier, people are like radio receivers in a way, and certain people's frequencies are more in tune than others, or some people have a much narrower frequency where they're like, I don't see or hear or feel any of that. And some people have a much wider frequency range that they can pick up on different things. And that also works if you think of ghosts and spirits as energy and frequencies. Some people's ranges are wider, so you're getting more of that input in. Ricardo states, churches and graveyards. I went to a graveyard in Mexico and they are not very well maintained, but I didn't feel as dark and heavy as American graveyards. Interesting. It could also, well, I know Mexican cultures and stuff have a different view of death as less of a heavy grievance. Like, obviously, things are sad, but I think with like Dia de los Muertos and things like that, where you're seeing death as more of the bridge to the next life. And I think for a lot of Americanized culture, where me speaking me personally, as an American, but also like originally Mexican American, I am kind of separated from my culture in that respect. That I don't really have all that, and I think for a lot of Americans, our original culture has been kind of stripped away, where either the language or the customs. So we may be like Americanized in the sense of just being sad or angry or upset like that when someone passes. Americans, I know. Uh, I think that would go into when you go to certain places and feel that energy, and it may be a negative energy or just not the vibes you're looking for. That's when it comes into like boundaries, and like clarity and spiritual practices. I know there are certain prayers and things that in spiritual practices they try to say like, only that of the highest good or something. So only that's who only is allowed to speak to me. I think people who do like psychic tarot readings, mediumship, they only request or give the energy out that only those spirits of the highest good, will, preferably unless they're looking for something else, those are the ones to be able to come into contact with them. Victoria says, yes, I love giving Victoria just little things to laugh at. That is lovely. But I think there was also one. There was a short I watched talking about like spirits, ghosts, energy, things like that. But in the biblical sense, all I can remember is it was Psalm 90 or Psalm 91 in the Bible, but I can't remember the actual like biblical quote. I'll probably link it in the comments if you're interested. I'll find that short and put it down there after the live. So if you're interested more in that aspect of spiritual protection and the biblical Christian biblical or biblical sense, yeah, I'll put that down there. Ricardo says, I guess it's more so the sense and remember how finite human life is seen as in the US compared to other cultures. Yeah. I think that's also something, if we can go on a little tangent, I've noticed. I personally like the longevity circles. I don't know if any of you guys know, like Brian Johnson, Blueprint, all that stuff. One of his primary quotes, he's doing like biohacking, longevity, trying to essentially live forever, or see how long he can live healthily, fully healthy, quality of life wise, and then how he can kind of make that blueprint for other people to follow. But in it, one of their primary quotes, which I'm like, ugh, is called "Don't Die," which I kind of don't 100% agree with. It's more like being present or staying alive is the process. Because I personally believe more in reincarnation, or that you're put here in this life for a reason. So I don't mind the idea of someone living healthfully, quality of life wise, to 120, 150, even like 180 or 200. Um, as long as they're like purposefully living, like the spiritual side of them is being advanced, the science side of them is being advanced. They're fully integrating whatever lessons they need to learn, and like having the best life they can. So maybe instead of like 20,000 lives of living, I don't know if that's how it actually works in reincarnation. They're only going to have like 14,000. Like, oh, good for you, bro. Uh, but yeah, so that kind of aspect, like Ricardo said about like understanding like human lives and the finite of it is like, yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. I think it's more about the quality of life than the quantity of life. And then it goes into like this dystopian aspect of how our world is, of like, are the rich people are going to be living like 300, 400 years, and they're just making it terrible and terrible for poor people. And they're the ones living on like 60 or 80. That's sad. Like, geez. Okay. Anyway, recalling my own boundary and just be like, we're not going into dystopian world right now. We're talking about ghosts, spirits, and energy. So this is our stories that sticks segment. Um, does anyone have any moments that particularly touched them in the sense of that felt too perfect or weird uh, to be more than just random, be it ghost related, spirit related, maybe just energy related? Anybody have a story that they would like to share that maybe something like that occurred in their lives where synchronicities were involved? I personally can't recall one that in spirit, like ghost spirits, because I personally don't go to haunted places. Try to avoid those. I think the most, like I said, like um, Danielle mentioned earlier, the house, not the House of Death, the Museum of Death, that was the most heaviest presence energy I've ever felt. Like it literally felt like, yeah, where it felt like the weight was on your back and you couldn't fully breathe in that place. So that's the most for me that I've ever encountered, or the most I've ever put myself in a situation where things were heavy in that regard. So please share. Even as I continue on, if you are typing away, please share any of those moments you may have had where either you felt the elation of something positive, a place that felt great, or even the heaviness of not so great. And then going into the meaning, making meaning. What we tend to notice in our lives, be it synchronicities or when a loved one has passed or dealing with grief and things like that, we tend to notice things that may be of severe spiritual or psychological significance. Like I think there's a way to test this where they said like you pick a number or you pick a thing, a color, something, and then if you concentrate on that for like the next 3 days to a week, you'll start noticing it popping up more frequently. But it's more so that you're actually paying attention to it. So when you're in grief, when you're in those moments, those synchronicities, those meaningful or psychologically meaningful or spiritually meaningful things may be more noticeable at that time because you are more in tune with that. And I think when it comes to like haunting um, of people when dealing with the death of a loved one, I think a quote was like grief. Um, it could be considered like the loved ones trying to stay in touch or console you themselves. So that is something that when it comes to the science or the spirituality aspect of it, it goes to the human aspect of just trying to find meaning, as Ricardo mentioned, the finality. Well, I'll just change it to finality of death, particularly in American culture, since a lot of us are kind of removed from our original cultures. And another side tangent of mine, I think unknowingly in American culture, maybe even Western culture, if we can kind of make a broader band of it. But since I'm American, that's my viewpoint, is that when someone says they're non-religious or just says, sure, I'm Christian, but then you ask, do they go to church regular, even if they say they don't, or if they say they do, a lot of times when you ask further questions, you may realize um, the God they think they believe in may not really be it, or if they say they're non-religious or what have you, the God they actually think of is like the economy and money, and that's who they more so put their worship attention towards. That's just my own little side note tangent of my American view of what I've noticed. So that kind of goes to kind of the scarier realm of realizing not a lot of people being self-aware of who they're really worshiping and who they're putting their energy towards, and what system and cycles they're actually continuing. But going back to grief, one of my favorite quotes concerning grief in general was, grief is just love that has nowhere else to go. And I think that's still, when I say it, it kind of makes me tear up a little bit, because you can't hug the person anymore. You can't talk to them. You can't make them their favorite food. So that's like grief is totally okay as a thing, because it's just showing how much you loved them. Tori states, I believe that the more you talk about these types of things, it does open up you up to more seeing or believing more of the things that we should not be seeing. We are still alive, which some are not ready to believe or even accept. Yes, I think it depends on everyone's journey. Like, what you could have like 20 people see the same vision in the sky or something, and you'd have 20 different inferences of what they think it represented or meant. And then considering where they are in their journey, they could either be scared, horrified, or they could be elated or happy. It really depends on where you are in your journey and your own experiences and stuff like that. I think when that goes into, when you talk about like hauntings and meaning making of, not necessarily hauntings, but meaning making, it's like Ricardo stated, being like sensitive, some like whether Ricardo, who's talked about um, feeling the energy in certain places, and then Danielle also mentioned like the museum of death, feeling that heaviness of energy, and I too have experienced that in the museum of death. Um, and then learning that some people, although like going into certain places can make you feel like very uncomfortable or maybe like heavy or elated or things like that. And understanding that in your own sense of identity, that doesn't mean like you're necessarily broken. It just reframed as you're more, you have wider frequencies than maybe some other people do, which isn't a judgment as a positive or good or a bad thing, or a judgment on the other person who may have like a smaller frequency that they are tuned to, but it's just saying like, be aware of who you are, that those things, be it like Victoria said, letting things in, be it media, be it music, be it actual places or conversations with people or things like that, affect you more. So being aware of where your lines are and where your boundaries are and where you feel safe, where you feel connected, and what probably isn't healthy for you. So chat, and more of a reflection of what we talked about. I know we didn't touch deeply on a lot of topics, but we did get somewhat around them. What do you hope is true about consciousness after we die? I personally, like I said, I believe more so in reincarnation. So I really hope that this is more just a learning experience, as one of the ideas that have been floating around, I think, a lot in philosophy circles and spiritual circles, also in my own head recently, is that no matter what you think happens, like death is final, you're atheist, don't believe in a God or nothing, like it's done. Or you believe you go to heaven, or you believe you go to hell, things like that. That it's an interesting mind experiment to hold it as less, I'm a physical being with a consciousness, and kind of flip it to being like, I'm a conscious being having a physical experience. I think that kind of opens the door to one, living life more fully, maybe more integrated in general with your spirituality, with your science, of what you actually want to do here and accomplish. But it also gives you that idea that energetically your consciousness does do something when you die, or even does something while you're alive. We have dreams, we have things like that. Yeah, you can do stories, you can leave somewhat of a legacy or something like that. So, Chad, what do you think happens, or what do you think hope? What do you hope is true about consciousness after we die? You hope it kind of lives on as a spirit. Do you want to be a ghost? Would you like to just be walking around but without a physical body, or do you hope it's more of a spiritual thing where maybe you don't even need that body anymore? You see it as a separate thing from you. After once you leave, you're just like, oh, you did well for me, body. Thank you so much. The life I lived was blessed, and then go onward. Ricardo says, I believe that the finality of things is that we derive beauty from. Okay. All the things that exist on a scale larger than a human life become harder and harder to comprehend. Maybe, okay, so maybe that life is what it is. Like, your the consciousness from a god or consciousness in general, it isn't the point of where it came from or how it came to be. The point it is here. And so the point is, if it is here, what are you going to do with it? Meaning, enjoy what it is here, and don't worry too much about like the vastness of the universe and things like that. But do your best in your realm, pretty much your life, the people you love, the people you care about. Because even if there is nothing after death, that doesn't matter as much as how the people you loved made you feel, how you made them feel, how you connected with other beings of consciousness and things like that. Connection. I may be going off a little tangent there, Ricardo, but I think maybe some of that is what you meant. Yes, Ricardo. It's important to live the life to the fullest now in this life. Yes. As for spirits, I do think there are extraordinary people, whether good or bad, who can permanently change their surroundings. Huh. So do you think, chat, let anybody else can chime in too, energetically, I think that does go into something because like even like manifestation, they talk about energetically like manifesting what you want in life. But I think also when people, like individual or on a whole, put a lot of their energies towards something like thoughts. I think it's like an Aristotle quote, like your thoughts, guard your thoughts because they become your words, and you guard your words because they become your actions. Your actions become your habits, and your habits become who you are. Some form of that. Danielle says, "I hope my consciousness continue to expand. That would be fun." Yeah, but like what Ricardo was stating, that extraordinary people, whether good or bad, who can permanently change their surroundings. So I think like that's the line of manifestation. Also, some thought experiments where pretty much what you water grows. Um, that what you think about, you tend to talk about. What you talk about, hopefully, if it meets that threshold, you tend to do. And then what you do becomes part of who you are. And this is what you do. And then those ripple effects. If you do, if you think well, you speak well. And I mean that in the term of being a good human being, not in literal, like I speak well, am eloquent. But then, and you do good in those regards, the ripple effect of you're living the life that you want to live, meaning you're a drop in the ocean, but the ripples have an effect pretty much. Ricardo said, I think the movie Hereditary is a very apt metaphor for how I see haunting. Even though there is a real demon and cult, the real demon slash ghost is the trauma the matriarch of the movie passed her. Oh yes, I do recall. I have not watched the movie, but I do watch. Like I said, I'm a was it? I definitely watch a lot of like found flicks where they explain movies because I don't want to sit for 2 hours and watch something scary because then it stresses me out. But I want to watch 20, 25 minutes to know what happened because I love stories. And I love seeing like story how they made it or what they inferred and stuff. That's great. But yeah, I totally get that. Where I think a lot of media currently, when it deals with like generational trauma and things like that, I think even like there's a Netflix series, I want to say House of Usher, but I think that's a Edgar Allan Poe story. House of something, House on Haunted Hill, something, and I think they went that way with it a bit too. I'm not sure. I didn't watch it. I didn't watch a short of it or anything, or like shortened version of it. Danielle states, staying open in love or wonder of life definitely allows for more opportunities to be a parent. Yes. I think that goes back into like when you're thinking of like, I'm looking for a word or a number or color or a song, and then it starts showing up like synchronicity. It's because you're more aware and attention is that. So I think if you're staying open to love or wonder in life, you may find that more often in life. Like seeing the beauty in the simple things or actually paying attention and noticing. So it goes back to what you water grows or what you pay attention to, flourishes and things like that. So yeah, that's lovely. Um, I think when we get to the integration aspect of it, I think it goes into like safety practices and like skepticism. I think there's like breath work you can do that is like the normal, like also psychology wise, where it's like grounding yourself with like I am here, this is where I am in my body. So when you get that eerie feeling or you get really nervous or anxious about something, and then like the deep breaths and stuff like that. I think there's also like box breathing where you breathe in, count to 4, and then breathe out 4. You may also hold it for 4. I don't know, don't quote me on it, but that's a way. I think I've actually practiced it, but I have practiced so infrequently that I can't recall exactly how it's done. I think there's also like space reset, or like in the spiritual sense there is like smudging, where even if I think that goes back into like the energetic play of your thoughts, and like safety of things like that, where if you're just like, I know smudging seems ridiculous because like you're doing sage, for some people it seems ridiculous, but if you're just thinking like I don't think this is going to do anything, then it might not do anything. But if you have intention behind it and you're saying this house is safe, I'm clearing out the space, positive energy is flowing through me to the rest of the house, that gives the energy for it. And I think also there was a fun thing that came across when I was studying stuff was about boundaries and safety, was like, you putting salt across your threshold. Danielle says, inhale 4, hold 4, exhale 4, hold 4. Thank you. That is box breathing. Brought to you by my terrible explanation and helped by Danielle, who gave me a better explanation. Gave us all a better explanation. Thank you. But there was when people salt like your doorway, your backyard, or around your house. I thought that was really interesting because from a real perspective, um, things like salt are abrasive. So you can imagine things like cockroaches or certain bugs would be repelled because of the salt and like the taste of just like, oh, what is that? But then also when you think of certain like plants, like invasive plants, it could like harm your foundation. Salting around your house kind of would help that because the soil would literally be salted and nothing wants to grow right there. So like that's very interesting to think about like the spiritual sense, but think of it as a real scientific sense of protecting your house or your boundary in that sense too. So that was cool. But I think also like, yeah, like I said, opening a window, letting things air out and things like that. Victoria said, and pray. Yes, I think in prayer, yes, that goes into your thoughts and your intention and putting that energy out there. And if there are you believe in a God and you believe in God or spirits or angels, putting that intention, that thought out there, that frequency could bring other positive spirits or energies to you. So yeah, that totally counts, Victoria. Totally counts. Yeah. So I think with saying with that, I what do you think, chat? After this is the end of our time together, or nearing so. Are you a skeptic? Are you um, more sensitive or spiritually inclined about the possible reality of like ghosts, energy, and spirits, or are you kind of both? Where you're like, you know what? Let's just combine those two and believe in all of it. As some is science, some is spirituality. All is all is reality, pretty much. To be layered. I think either way, it gives us permission when you hold those thoughts um, to accept the reality of whatever is occurring. If someone's saying it's a haunting, the floorboards are creaking, you got a cold draft going on, you got weird smells, to accept that, okay, it may not be a ghost, but the reality is all this is occurring. Or, things like that. So then it would be seek the mundane causes first to see if, like, is there a gas leak? If someone's seeing things, making sure all the safety things is, is heater or the air conditioning making a weird humming sound that probably is slowly driving someone crazy or mad? Is there other normal or mundane things that could be occurring, but also hold space, hold space for the mystery and respect. For mystery and holds the for the mystery and the respect of there are things that we don't quite understand yet. So yes, if tonight opened something up for you, or well, first of all, I will see you all on Thursday. There is a game night. We'll be playing Oxenfree, and that may be more of an encased storyline. So if you haven't quite joined us, Ricardo states, I like the idea of the supernatural, and I very much rely on my ancestors for spiritual comfort, but I derive meaning because I believe that once I'm gone, it's lights out. So I have to make the most. That is lovely, Ricardo. I love that. It's like, even if you don't believe in a life after death, it's empowering to be like, I'm not going to just say, well, there's nothing after death, so I'm doing nothing. I can do what I want. And you're taking that power of being like, I am alive now. I am in reality. I can affect things. I can make people feel good about themselves. I can make people feel bad. I can make the world better or I can make it worse. And I choose what I choose every day, kind of thing. Danielle says, I think our existence, including the earth and all life, is strange. Life continues to amaze me. I think the physical and the spiritual, mystical are not independent of each other. All right, team both. Yes. I personally also am team both, as like I said, I believe more so in reincarnation, as that just fit in with my train of thought of things. But also, yeah, that there are things that we can't quite explain yet. And there are things we may not be able to explain, but maybe once things are done, you're like, ha, that's what was happening. Um, so yeah, I love this chat. This was great. Thank you all for joining in on the chat and typing away. I love it. And thank you so much for participating. This Thursday, we are doing a game night live, 2 hours of gameplay, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. We'll be playing Oxenfree. It's more of an encapsulated story. So if we don't get through it that live, I'll most likely play it as an upload on Friday as well. So if you're very interested in the game, you can come and hang out in the live where we're going to chat about what's happening in the game and like little questions and keep it fun. But then we'll also, feel free to watch the next video on Friday when that logs. I had fun. Thank you. Um, Stay tuned for that Friday when another upload will come up. And I am working on getting some of these condensed lives out. So instead of the full hour, maybe if you didn't join us for all of them, but you are interested in some topics, or maybe a full hour just seems a bit daunting to you, then there will be condensed lives coming up. I think every Sunday. Maybe not this Sunday, but we're doing it. We're trying. We're trying real hard to get that done. So they'll be about 20, 25 minutes each. So, it gives more of a sample size. So you're not bombarded with feeling like an hour. And then next Tuesday live, I have thought about this, but I can't recall. But the November's lives, the calendar for November's lives will be up on my Instagram at Angela and then some, as well as you'll be able to find them. I'm pretty sure I'll make a community post about it here on YouTube. If you haven't, go check that out. I do update things very regularly on there. And yes, Danielle said thanks for live. So yeah. Lastly, if you like this live tonight and you enjoyed it, please like the video. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And then comment a word. I don't know what word. Maybe comment haunted if you enjoyed this live. Maybe comment curious if it made you feel curious, or maybe just send me a heart emoji if you're like, I just loved it. Haunted if you love the ghost talks. Curious if you love the conversation of talking about all the different aspects. And then type in a heart emoji if you're like, I just loved it. Thanks. This was great. But either way, I will see you all Thursday or Tuesday. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.